Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob Staten, Robbie Williams, Adam Nathan with you here, and we're going to get into everything that's been happening with the Seahawks since we last came together, which is quite a long time ago now. Quite a lot has happened since then with free agency, and we're less than a month away from the draft now. So, fellas, just let's start with a general thought on free agency and where the Seahawks currently are. Robbie, how are you feeling about the Seahawks right now?
Yeah, I mean, I like the position they've put themselves in. Generally speaking, I don't think there's been anything that's been too shocking. The only thing actually shocking lately is just the latest news of maybe Jamal Adams coming back, which is bananas. But that's about the only thing that's been shocking. Like I said, I think I've been pretty happy with everything they've done so far. Nothing that's been too crazy. I like the re-signing to George Fant. It'd be interesting to see what happens, with Draymond Jones later in the year when they get closer to training camp and all that. But yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for the draft, and I think it'll be interesting to see kind of what direction they're going to go with.
Got to get back to this Jamal Adams thing to start with because it's.
I had a feeling.
I wrote something about it very quickly earlier, and I feel like we need to get into this. But Adam, first of all, what are your thoughts on where the team are currently?
I think they're doing a nice job setting the table, but it doesn't seem that clear when the meal's going to arrive, would be the way I look at it right now. They're doing stuff that had to be done and is perhaps kind of clearing the credit card and purging some of the errors from the last few years. But, it's not the most inspiring of periods being a Seahawks fan in the short term, is it? There's obviously long-term stuff that you can look forward to, but, with a new coach, all the new coaches that are coming in, who I thought it's a shame really, because they did such a nice job when they came in with their initial interviews, and it was quite inspiring listening to them talk, and they were interesting guys. And then you have this little break of 2 months where you don't really hear much from them. And then you watch free agency happen, and you can kind of see what's happening. And they're never going to admit it, but it does feel like they're in at least a 2-year plan with what they're doing. But they're doing what we wanted, not prioritizing with big money positions that aren't that valuable, safety, linebacker, or whatever, and just plugging those gaps with guys. And that's fine. But, at a time where you'd really love to be looking to this season with huge optimism because of a new regime, it does kind of feel like there's a longer term plan at stake here, and we've just got to sit there and be a part of it and watch it unfold.
We have, but then that brings me back onto the Jamal Adams discussion, because this was the first sign of a concern for me, Adam and Robbie, that this was the decision makers clinging on to the past. And I thought when they drew a line under the old regime and moved on from, Diggs and Adams and Will Disley, and didn't bring back Bobby Wagner or Jordan Brooks, it was all very positive, and they were moving in a new direction, and it was going to be fresh and it was going to be new. And then we have this. So this is where it all started, basically. Brock Heward went on Seattle Sports and threw out the idea that Jamal Adams maybe could come back as a linebacker. And when he did that, I was thinking, is it like a slow news day? Have they got a thing to push on the website? What's going on here? Why has that been brought up? But then as time's gone on, John Schneider's spoken very openly about the willingness to bring him back. Mike McDonald said he loved Jamal Adams today. Think about, this was a coach who wouldn't even talk about Geno Smith initially, but is now saying that we love Jamal Adams. And people can say, I've already seen one comment in the comments saying, don't fall for the Seattle sports stuff. No. That's not what's going on here. Brock Heward went on the radio and essentially broke that the Seahawks were signing Jerome Baker and Tyrell Dodson. He went out there and said, they are going to sign 2 linebackers in the next couple of days. Jerome Baker is going to be one of them. And it happened. And he was the first person who really spoke about it. And then when he was pressed like the next day, you got that one right. Who's next? Well, Tyrell Dodson's a name to keep an eye out there. He basically broke those stories. He has got a source with the Seahawks, and he is using it, and he is somebody worth paying attention to at the minute. And he brought that up. And then you've got Mike McDonald saying he loves Jamal Adams. My theory is that John Schneider is now looking at a new coaching staff and thinking he can maybe salvage the narrative on the worst trade that he has ever made as a GM. And Mike McDonald's mentality is probably, not to argue with John on this possibility, to be open-minded about it as a young first-time head coach, and also to think, like all coaches do, I can fix this guy. Because that is always the mentality that just give me him and bring him in and I'll get him right again. He's a 213-pound, constantly injured, broken individual who has become really toxic and made himself sound like a complete clown at the end of last season. And it was a relief when he was cut so that we don't have to deal with his nonsense anymore. Bringing him back and trying to make him into a pseudo linebacker when his body is practically broken anyway, and nobody else is interested in signing him. Robbie, explain this one to me. Why are they giving any thought to this whatsoever? This feels like a thing that we've seen in the past, whereby they just can't let go sometimes, and they keep bringing the same people back. And I think John Schneider is still caught up on this huge flub of a trade and trying to salvage something out of it. And I think he just needs to bloody let it go. What I said on the blog was he's like Indiana Jones reaching out for the grail at the end of Last Crusade. And Indy's dad goes, Indiana, let it go. Just let it go. And he listens to his dad and he survives rather than falling through the hole like the Nazi. Well, don't be the Nazi falling through the hole. Be Harrison Ford, who gets to ride off into the sunset with his dad and his two mates. That's what my advice would be, Robbie.
Yeah. I mean, I can't explain it at all. I had a feeling this was going to be a hot topic for us today, but no, nothing really makes too much sense about it. Hopefully, it's just a lot of talk and nothing actually there. But I'm just having a hard time wrapping my mind around bringing him back to play linebacker. It could be something, as you said, maybe trying to justify the trade. He's tired of hearing about it, so bringing him back just to maybe hopefully Mike McDonald can prove a point and make him something. I'm not really sure. It would piss me off. Well, I'm just going to say it. It would not make me very happy to bring him back. There's nothing about so far this offseason that has like made me super mad. That would be it. So I'm ready to move on from the Peacock and go in a different direction.
Adam?
Yeah, I wasn't sure where you were going with after that. He's a 213-pound, but I'll go with he's a 213-pound wanker. And ultimately, I just don't want people like that on the team. Like, forget all the play stuff. The stuff he did personally with the journalist, like, it massively crossed the line to a point where I think all Seahawk fans, even ones that pretend online to be, a 12 for life or whatever, he crossed the line to a point where he was a poor representative of the team. And he's just not someone that should even be considered as a representative or an ambassador for this team. I just can't understand him. I would far more understand if they said Quandre Diggs was going to come back, because, at least he would serve a purpose. He does cover the middle in a way that you could understand McDonald might want that. But I just don't understand it at all. The only thing that I do think is worth discussing is there's a lot of chat all off season so far about, oh my God, John Schneider is cooking. The way in which he's cutting all of these deals. Like, look at what an amazing job John Schneider's doing clearing salary cap. I think people need to come to a realization that John Schneider wrote and signed all of these deals and agreed these deals. Like, all of the deals that he's apparently a genius for cutting, which is not that difficult. You just say, I'm going to cut that guy. I mean, he signed them in the first place. I mean, the thing that I'm led to believe on a pretty reliable basis is that, Pete Carroll was the guy that would say, look, I'd really like this guy on the team. And John would go about getting it and getting the deal over the line. And if anything, Schneider's insistence on trying to get Adams back and the stuff he said a couple of weeks ago about how he was desperate, to almost prove that the trade worked. It does show that it wasn't just Pete Carroll making everything happen in the last 10 years. John Schneider was, he was very much involved in the situation. And I think there's just a bit too much of this idea that, the Let John Cook brigade, I think, needs to rein it in slightly. I've just seen the super chat, which is just fantastic. I'm really pissed off about this. I don't want the guy anywhere near the team.
Yeah, so to explain the super chat, a huge... Oops, sorry, Matt, I put your comment up by accident. It flicked in. Odium has sent in a fantastic super chat, and he said it. He messaged me. I read it just before I came on and did the stream. That he is he's supporting the new comment section in the Seahawks Draft Blog live chat. So not live chat, the comment section is just a little bit different, and I really appreciate that support. It's huge, and it's a subscription service now. So the comment section used to be part of WordPress, but now I'm paying for a different service. So the feedback's on it's been really good so far, but I'm interested to see what everybody feels about it. And thank you, Odium, for supporting the investment in that new comment section. And I really appreciate it. I can't believe how supportive some people are with the blog, and I constantly appreciate it. What I don't appreciate is the thought that the Seahawks might re-sign Jamal Adams, and I completely agree with everything that Adam has said there. I don't see the benefit whatsoever. Even if you get him on a minimum veteran contract and throw him into the mix, I just don't want to watch him play for the Seahawks anymore. It was a terrible trade. He didn't play well. I put the stats on the block. He missed 33 games in 4 seasons for the Seahawks. His PFF grade was something like 59.7 over his average time here. He didn't have a sack in 3 seasons. He didn't make enough plays. He's constantly chuntering and chirping at opponents all the time. You know, when Richard Sherman used to do like that after an incompletion, yeah, it's because Richard Sherman was the best cornerback in the NFL when he was doing that, and it was really hard to get a completion on him, and targeting him was stupid. Like Jamal Adams will go and get in the face of Jake Ferguson after he's just bulldozed Quandre Diggs for a first down. Like, what are you doing? Like, it was amazing to me that when Jake Ferguson scored that touchdown, and that was the yikes play that led to the tweet from the reporter, that if you see it from the all-22 angle, CD Lamb like sprints from the other side of the field to laugh in Jamal Adams' face because he just talked all the way through a game where he was crap. So I've just had enough. Mike McDonald, he's not going to be listening to this, but Mike McDonald, do not fall for this idea that you can fix this guy. He's broken. It's time to let him go and try and play somewhere else. They're clearly all queuing up to sign Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs, by the way, because it's March 26th and they're still not being linked with anybody. Go and get somebody out. And John, for God's sake, John, just go and draft. And if you want another safety or another hybrid, go and draft one. There are guys in this draft. Someone's just said maybe he could bulk up to 225. No, if he was going to bulk up, he can't bulk up to 225. Just look at a picture of Jamal Adams. There is not 12 pounds of weight to be added on there unless he's going to eat cheeseburgers for the next 2 months. The guy cannot add weight. He is maxed out. He is a thick individual in more ways than one. And he is not in any way, shape, or form capable of adding another 12 pounds to his body without it just being bad weight. We just need to just move on. Let's not entertain this. But they are. They are entertaining it. And it really frustrates me. And somebody mentioned it earlier. I think it was Big Mike. If there's one flaw that John has, I think he has a bit of an ego. And I think the failure of the Adams trade is a real dent on his ego. And I think that he and McDonald have sat down, had a conversation. Mike McDonald is open to the idea of bringing in Jamal Adams and trying to give it a go. And John has thought, why not? Because it might make me look better. And I think they just need to bloody move on. Someone said Dominic Hampton instead. Yes. Go and get that guy. He will not, he might cost a 4th round pick. He is so much a better option than Jamal Adams right now. Do not go and sign him again. Anyway. Let's move on. What do we think about the offensive line? Robbie, what do you, when you look at this, there's a huge gaping hole at left guard. They've signed a backup center, or he may start Nick Harris, but competition at center if you want to say that. But neither center option is mind-blowing at this point. Anthony Bradford does not have any competition on the right side currently, apart from maybe some of the guys that sort of stuck on the back end of the roster on the practice squad last year. Abe Lucas, still a question mark. George Fant's come in. Charles Cross, I think, has had a couple of underwhelming seasons as a top 10 pick. Robbie, where are you at with this O-line right now?
Well, I know they're not done with it, that's for sure. And I think they're probably going to target a lineman in the draft. And you've said multiple times that this is a fairly deep draft on the O line. I did see they were interested in Laken Tomlinson, so that could be an option. I'm actually really curious to think what they think of Anthony Bradford and what they have in him. I'm interested to see what they can do with him because I remember being pretty excited about him last year when he got drafted. So I'm really kind of curious to see what they what they think of him and what they can get out of him as far as a right guard goes. I think that's probably the biggest hole on the team right now is the offensive line, but I know they're not done, so I'm not like super worried about it. And I know they'll keep trying to plug in guys. I don't know if it'll be a complete unit this year, but they're going to definitely try.
I've got a couple of theories on the offensive line, but Adam, how do you sort of feel about it right now? Because that's the one area that looks, like if they had to play a game tomorrow, that's the one area that you'd sort of really worry about.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have to play a game tomorrow, but I don't think that even when they have to play games in September, we're going to be looking at that offensive line as a position of great strength. It does feel like their first round pick, if it's not used specifically on a guard, will be used to trade back, and they'll take a guard with something that they pick up with that first round. So that will plug a hole. And yeah, look, I think it goes back to my first comment. I think this is a table setting period, and it's going to take a couple of years and a couple of drafts to get going. And, at least talking about Jamal Adams is moderately entertaining. I mean, there's a bit back down to a bump. What do we think about the interior offensive line in mid-March? I mean, it's not thriller-minute stuff, let's be honest.
Well, okay. Well, listen, I do have a theory on the offensive line. I think that this coaching staff want a young offensive line. And I think that obviously today, Brady Henderson's been, and he's another person that people should be listening to, has linked them to Cody Whitehair and Laken Tomlinson. And it would make some sense to have one of those individuals in to hedge against the draft so they can go best player available and not feel like it's a disaster zone. Because look, not that having either of those players would be a cure-all, but I think it'd be better than Tremaine Ankrum. But I do think they want a young offensive line. I think that's just the way that the more that you watch Washington and kind of study what Scott Huff has done, it's athleticism, it's aggression, it's clearly a young offensive line because it's college. And it's why I don't think they've gone out and looked at people like Kevin Zeitler, who are at the back end of their career, because they're not in that. They can be quite savvy and battle hardened, but I do think they want a young offensive line. I think they want to get after teams up front. So I wouldn't be surprised if, yes, either they trade down and the first pick's a defensive lineman, or they stay at 16 and it's a defensive lineman. I also wouldn't be surprised if they add offensive linemen. And I think fans need to be ready for this. Can you remember a year ago where they didn't sign nose tackle or defensive tackle was a big need, and they didn't address it till round 4 with Cam Young? And I could imagine something like that happening with the guard position this year, where they draft somebody like Trevor Keegan, who's played like 44 games for Michigan, and they just plug him in at left guard because he's played left guard at Michigan, and that's their starter for next year. It wouldn't surprise me if that was what they do. I just think it might not be the most interesting topic, but I do think it's something that is worth raising because I can sense that fans will question what they're doing, will panic a little bit because they don't have 2 or 3 names that are well-established names. And I think that they probably will be more comfortable with Oluwatimi and with Bradford, and hoping that Lucas can come back with Fant as an insurance and Cross and then a young guard. I think they want to get young up front. I know a lot of people will disagree with that and they'll want to be experienced up front, but that's just what I think the Seahawks are going to do.
Do you think that strategy is correct, Rob, as opposed to, because you typically, cliche talk about, having some experience there, they can anchor the line. I mean, would you have wanted them to go out and spend decent money on a Zeitler or someone like that?
I think the most important thing for any offensive line is chemistry and consistency. Part of the problem that NFL teams have is that they find it very hard because there are not many good interior offensive linemen across the league, and therefore they're constantly just shuffling players in and out all the time, and they can never. All the position groups in the league, your offensive line have to be connected. They have to understand what each of them are doing. They have to all work together as a group. And and not enough teams have been able to do that. And I think there's a broader problem. If you actually, this is something I don't think people are that aware of. If you go on PFF and look at their grades for the NFL, the guard grades are all very average. Like there's basically like a couple of high performing guards, and then everyone else is much of a muchness. The grades are a lot lower than other positions. And then when you go on college, the same thing happens. So all of the other positions, you have like an elite group. And at college, all of the grades are quite low for interior linemen within college. That might be a flaw within PFF's system, but to me, it suggests that there just isn't quality guard play across the league, which is also contributing to this, and teams are finding it very hard. So to answer your question specifically, Adam, there is some appeal to just getting people who you know can do you a job for a year, like Kevin Zeitler. But at the same time, you would then have to replace him a year later because he's basically a year removed from retirement or a year away from retirement. And I think the best thing the Seahawks could do is to try and create a set of 5 guys or 7 guys, because you're going to need some backups there who might feature and fill in, who can grow together over a period of time. And you might have to have a bit of growing pains and be a bit sort of take that on the chin in a year and reassure fans as to what you're trying to do. And if that is the plan, having a young offensive line would be a wise idea. But I don't think anybody's really tried that yet. I don't think we've seen a team sort of go and Mike McDonald talks about finding edges. Getting a young line that grow together might be a way to find an edge in terms of cost-effective nature of the way that the guard position is being paid and also the chemistry aspect. So I think it could be a very interesting idea. But then I also see the benefit of just having 5 dogs who know what they're bloody doing up front and just carving open holes. This one from Chris says, no way we bring back Jamal. The thought of it is disturbing. It is disturbing, Chris. I agree. Thanks for the super chat. Keep those coming if you want to support the channel or the blog. Much appreciated. Robbie, there's a sort of bigger question that I want to come to. I've been saving it for sort of halfway through. But flip it to the defensive line side. One thing I am quite intrigued about, and I didn't really think about this at first. I thought it's just so obvious that they've got a hole on the offensive line that's going to be the main target area. But the more I've thought about it this week, I'm really open to the idea of trying to get the best defensive lineman possible with your first pick, whether that's 16 or after a trade down. Because look at how much impact the Rams and the Niners have been able to have by having the best defensive line in the division, in the NFC. One of the best in the NFC. Philadelphia's has been up there as well. If the Seahawks add one more really good, let's say, interior defensive lineman, you combine them with Leonard Williams, Jaron Reed, you've got some depth there, you can rotate, you've got some edge rushers that you've invested in. Could that actually create something that the Seahawks can hang their hat on? Because at the minute, they don't seem to have a unit that other teams envy. Could one more really useful, highly drafted interior lineman, Robbie, set up a unit that other teams wish they had?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely. They also signed Jonathan Hankins, which I think that they're pretty excited about. So yeah, I think another defensive tackle or even another defensive end to come in to help that line. Any sort of rotation is going to be beneficial for the team. And I'm good with O-line or D-line, anything that's going to help kind of build up either side of the ball, because that's an area that I feel like has been lacking for the last few years. So for me, I'm stoked to go either direction. To be honest, I'd like to see it. I'd like to see. I mean, in the first 4 rounds, I'd like to see a defensive tackle and an offensive lineman taken.
Have you seen any of the defensive linemen, Robbie? Have you had a chance to look at any of these guys, like the interior guys, the edge guys who are kind of projected to go quite early?
I mean, I probably haven't studied like their short shuttles or anything as much as you have, but yeah, I definitely, I've seen them play.
Yeah, because good luck getting the short shuttle information. Like hardly anybody's doing them. But is there anybody that you think, well, they would be, because obviously certain players are not going to be available to Seattle, but is there anybody that you think, well, that's a realistic target between, say, 16 and 25 that you think I'd be very interested in them?
See, I think I have a different mindset on that, because, like there's certain players that, I've heard like, oh, these guys aren't going to be available, but I'm hearing crazy things. JJ McCarthy is going to go in the top 5, which you called a few when we were I don't know, a month ago, which just
you laughed, Robbie.
I still don't get it, dude. And so like for me, I'm still trying to figure it out. I went back and I looked at the stats. There's only like 2 or 3 games the guy threw the ball over 28 times. There's 2 games where he threw less than 13 passes. most of the games were blowout. That's sorry, I'm not going to get into JJ McCarthy. But if depending on what happens, if people are that crazy and they decide that they're going to trade up, and all these guys, there could be a ton of guys that end up dropping down because people are reaching for, a JJ McCarthy or something. I think there could be someone who could fall in our laps at 16 that will shock us a little bit.
I think you might be right. And, I think there's a couple of things to mention on that. Firstly, for McCarthy, I agree with you, Robbie. I'm right. I'm not a big fan of JJ McCarthy. And on the board that I do, he is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, my 6th ranked quarterback. He is what we were talking about the combine it's the intangible thing. And all the teams just seem to have fallen in love with him, but almost literally. It's as if they've just become smitten with his intangible qualities and the idea that he's a winner. But you actually watch the tape and it is so thoroughly unspectacular. They basically put him in a blanket for the pro day. You can't find any footage of it. I saw someone tweet saying, if JJ McCarthy throws at a pro day and nobody sees it, does it actually happen? That's kind of how it felt. But how often do you sort of see that the players throw in the spectacular passes and the highlight throws to get the buzz on social media? And he didn't do any of that. So they've fallen for the intangible qualities, and he will go before Seattle's pick. There's no doubt about that. I mean, Robbie, they had a meeting with JJ McCarthy at the pro day. I think the concern could be that what if the Vikings managed to trade up to number 3, and then JJ McCarthy lasts to, let's say, the 9th pick or the 10th pick, and then the Seahawks start making calls about being the team, Robbie, that moves up and gets him.
You know what's funny is in your latest mock draft, I got pissed because I seen Tony Fatano went to 14 or 15. Yeah. I was like, if Seahawks are in that position, trade up and get the guy. He's going to be that good. You're two spots away, make the call. And then I don't remember who you traded down for, but I was just like, man, if someone like that is getting that close, then you trade up for it and get the player that could be really beneficial for you.
I think people are going to be surprised how the league views Troy Fatano. And he will not get past New Orleans at 14, in my opinion.
If he falls that far, man.
Yeah, I mean, he might not, but the fact that they're saying Ryan Ramchik's probably not going to play next year sort of sealed the deal. And there's other tackles. I mean, maybe they like JC Latham, but because Trevor Penning's been a disaster at left tackle, it'd be obvious to sort of bump him to the right or inside and then draft someone who can play left tackle, and that's Fatano, who is the best left tackle in this draft. It's not Joel. It's not Fashanu. It's Fatano. And I think it's going to go earlier than people think. The other thing was whether Penix goes early. Did you hear John Schneider saying the other day that we made the trade because we were looking at this team needs a quarterback, this team needs a quarterback, this team gets a quarterback, and we don't think anyone's going to be left. And I just made me think, maybe they're anticipating there's going to be quite a significant run on quarterbacks quite early, and that Penix might go to, let's say, the Raiders at 13, or maybe someone trades up above, the Raiders or the Seahawks to go and get Penix, and that maybe they're just going to be a run on quarterbacks. And then what you just said there, Robbie, about a good player being available at 16 could come true. But then maybe somebody else will want that good player and give you an amazing offer. That's the interesting dilemma that the Seahawks face. Adam, what do you think about building a great defensive line, or trying to build a great defensive? They've got a logjam at defensive tackle at the minute, as Robbie mentioned. They've got Jonathan Hankins. But do you think that's a plausible plan for the Seahawks to try and come away with something that, a great D-line will be something you can build a foundation on?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Nwosu's going to be back, and you have got McDonald, who, filled his defensive line at times last year with guys he sort of picked up off the street and turned them into great players, for the system that he was running. So I don't know. I kind of feel like they'll look to take an offensive guard if it works out. But if a great defensive lineman falls into their lap, that might be where they end up heading. I'm not sure. I don't even know if that makes any sense. But my hunch is that offensive line will be their primary focus, but it will sort of be like a kind of bonus if it ends up being defensive line they go with, and they're able to stack picks off 16. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think they're desperate to set up a situation going into the draft where all things are available to them. I think they feel that there's been a real benefit to doing that. And I genuinely don't think they're targeting any specific position. I think they're looking at players. And it could be that they have one offensive lineman, one defensive tackle, one pass rusher, who then, but in one quarterback or two quarterbacks, let's say, who at 16 they would stick and pick. I just think that the Seahawks are. I mean, this is a different topic. I think they're under more stress than any other team, probably in that middle part of the first round, because they're going to be anxious about what offers they are going to get when the time comes to talk trades. And not knowing perhaps until right before you pick could be a problem because you can't really plan. So what do you do? Like if the chances are, the mock that I did the other day that Robbie was referring to, I wanted to do a scenario where they didn't get a great offer to trade down. And that could happen. But then somebody could also offer them a great deal to move down 15 spots. But then you might end up passing on the next TJ Watt or something like that. So how do you do it? How do you sort of balance that out? Do you know what? Let's go on to the thing I wanted to talk about because we're about halfway through and we've got a couple of super chats. And I'll come to you first, Adam. I was listening to 710 or whatever it's called, the Seattle Sports these days, this morning, and they'd had Joel Klatt on the day before, and he suggested the Seahawks were in purgatory. And then they had a conversation about it, and I do think that everything they talked about made a lot of sense. And this is the massive number one fear that I have for the Seahawks right now, is that they are a team that does not have an obvious path to serious contention. They are either going to have to get extremely lucky with a draft pick that tilts them towards, and that was like the next Russell Wilson or whatever, Lamar Jackson, who you get without a top 5-10 pick. Or they're going to have an epic draft where they just find 3 unbelievable blue chip players without having the top picks maybe. And that just seems, when you've had a draft that you've had all the picks in the last 2 years and you haven't been able to deliver that so far, it seems quite far-fetched to think you're going to do that when you've only got 7 picks and 1 in the first 2 rounds. I worry, Adam, and Robbie, that they know they need to go and get a quarterback. They just don't know how to do it. And if you're in that position every year, what the hell do you do? Because I don't think this team is going to be a 3-14 team or a 4-13 team and be picking in the top 3 or 4 next year. And they're probably going to be in the same place they are now. And if you keep sticking in this area all the time, like you're just good enough to not be awful, but you're not bad enough to be in range for a great QB, how do you break out of that? Because there's loads of teams in that place.
Yeah, I mean, my instant reaction when I heard you talk about, Joel Klatt's comment is, well, I feel like we've been in purgatory for the last half decade, really, in the sense of a fairly stable position, wondering how you take the next step up and win. And, the Russell Wilson trade was probably perceived as a moment that the franchise could use to, turn one person or one player into 7 or 8 players and picks and whatever. But, for anyone that's played, I mentioned on our little thread, if you played Rummy Cub in the past, it's like they've rearranged the entire board that they're playing with, but they haven't actually put any of their tiles down to get closer to winning the game. They've done so much work in the last 2 years, 3 years to redevelop the team and rebuild this side and change the offensive line and change the defensive line, and the safeties are gone and the linebackers are gone. But they're not actually any closer to winning a title than they were 2 years, 3 years, 4 years ago. And maybe they're further because, we are in this position where we need that, the ultimate position. So, yeah, I mean, I think if anyone had the answer to how to get out of purgatory, there'd be a GM somewhere being paid $100 million a year because it would be the most important thing you could do. But I don't know. I mean, at some point, I feel like you have to pinch picks from the future to move up if you're in this position. Now, this may not be the draft we want to do that. But it does strike me that, and it didn't work out for the Niners, but a Trey Lance type thing that the Niners did to go and get the guy they were so forthright would be the guy might be the only way out of it. Because as you say, if you're picking between 16 and 20 every year or 16 and 23, 24, how do you build up the ammo to go and get the guy that you really want? Naturally, without pinching from the future. So at some point, I think you have to take the plunge and gamble. And if it doesn't work, well, you're not winning now, you're not winning then. So it is what it is. But I don't know when it happens, but that would be my interpretation of how to get out of it. That you, as I say, you have to get unbelievably lucky and have the draft of a lifetime, and you pick up a Russell Wilson in the later rounds, and then you're set. Otherwise, you have to pinch from somewhere. Would be my hunch.
Well, there's several things. I agree with you that they've been in purgatory for a while. I can remember actually we were sort of talking about Joel Klatt and Brock and Salk. They read an article out on the air after the Rams game in Week 1 last season, where I broke down exactly why the Seahawks were in purgatory and said they were kind of in the middle ground of the NFL, and they were arguing that the Seahawks have been above the middle ground and have been a better team than that. And now they're talking about it now as if that's been the case. And I think actually a lot of people are kind of in the place that we've been for a long time, that the Seahawks have kind of just been on a treadmill, and what we really want them to be is to get off the treadmill, get outside, and actually run forwards on the pavement, and actually get some ground here. And when they made that Russell Wilson trade, if you'd have said, "What do you think is going to happen?" When we were on that stream, Robbie, immediately afterwards, what's the next move going to be? At some point in the next 2 years, it's going to be to either draft a quarterback or be very aggressive to get one. And they came out of the 2 draft classes without even drafting a late round quarterback, let alone. They just traded for a guy who was available in the 5th round in 2022 that they could have had. They didn't even make a cursory investment in a late round pick at the quarterback. And now they're in this place where it's like, well, they've got everything. I also think that Geno Smith having a better year than everyone anticipated. People are going to hate, if this gets back to certain people, they're going to have a field day with this. I think that was one of the worst things that could have happened to the Seahawks, because all it did was make people think, ridiculously, that Geno Smith is the answer. There's the franchise quarterback. People have literally said that he's the franchise quarterback now. It's not true. He's a bridge. But that sort of good half, really good, really, really good first half of the season at 2022 has probably set the franchise back as much as anything, because it removed the urgency with which to get a quarterback. If Geno Smith had been terrible in 2022, and if the Seahawks had won fewer games, they probably would have been drafting CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson or whatever you think of Richardson. At least they would have had an investment in a quarterback, and we wouldn't have to have this conversation, because we'd just be waiting to see what the guy who they drafted would look like. But they haven't done that. Instead, they're now sort of going into another year. The Geno stuff, by the way, is hilarious. There are people out there now going, making quite funny remarks about the fact that they're now committed to Geno Smith. Yeah, it only took them to get through the entire combine and free agency before they were willing to announce that he's now the quarterback. It's very clear that they were open to parting ways with Geno Smith via trade, to bringing back Drew Lock. And when they discovered that there was no market for Geno, they did what was the sensible thing to do, which was to save money on the contract and just eat the situation that they've created. But they've created it. And nobody can think that these guys have got any real faith in Geno Smith, or that they wouldn't draft, let's say, a Drake May instead, given half an opportunity to do it. That's the situation. People saying it's not clear and naive as F. If you can't see how they communicated through all of this process, to how they're now shouting from the rooftops that Geno is the guy, and couldn't even mention his name when asked about him at the start of the initial Schneider press conference, the McDonald press conference, and kept bringing up Drew Lock, you are incredibly naive if you don't understand how this situation has gone about. And they are, Robbie, very conscious of needing to draft a quarterback and moving it in a new direction. I just keep feeling like they don't know how to do it. Like they don't they don't have the clarity on how to do it. And another year goes by, we all get a year older, and we're still no closer to finding out what the solution is.
Yeah, we're not any closer, especially with Geno being the starter. I think, I'm interested to see how long his leash is with Howell on the team. I'm actually going to shock you a little bit with this. I think both of you are going to probably be shocked. I'm starting to get on board on the Howell trade. I'm starting to get on board.
On the Howell.
Yeah, yeah, I'm starting to get on board with it. I went back and I watched. Like, first of all,
I thought you said a McCarthy trade. Did you say McCarthy trade?
No, I did not say McCarthy. I said Howell.
Oh, okay.
Howell.
Howell. Okay,
Howell,
not McCarthy.
Not McCarthy.
Okay.
I went back and watched a lot of Washington tape, and it was it's a really bad football team, and like I don't know what Eric Bieniemy was running there as far as offense. It was terrible, and I feel like the guy did everything he could. I mean, I'm not saying he's the answer or anything like that, but I like that they're giving him a shot. Give him a shot, bring this guy in, see what you got for him, and they didn't have to give up a ton to get him. I think there's something there that can be worked with. I like his arm talent. He has a couple balls that he threw that were really, really impressive. He also had some that were really, really bad, but I also I'm not blaming him for all 21 interceptions. He definitely holds on to the ball too dang long. That's for sure. He gets sacked a lot. I'll admit that. But I mean, I feel like Russ got sacked a lot as well. And I'm not going to fault the guy for trying to make an effort to make a play, but I think there's something there. That's all I'm going to say. I think there's something there. I want to see it, but I still think that they should go into the draft and draft a quarterback, or as someone rightly pointed out earlier, pay the iron price and move up and get the guy that you really want, which is so frustrating why they didn't do it last year when they had the opportunity and the draft capital to do so and decided not to.
Thing is, Robert, and you can adjudicate, does Robbie know ball?
Well, I don't know. What do you think of Geno Smith, Robbie, and Quandre Diggs? That's the determining factor on whether you know ball or not. I'm led to believe.
Yeah, fair enough. Do I know ball? I don't know. Maybe not. Just talking out of my ass.
No, just say Quandre is the best safety in the league, and Geno's a franchise quarterback then for the next 10 years because he's not played for so long.
Absolutely.
So he's obviously like fresh as a daisy. On the Howell thing, though, Robbie, 21 interceptions or whatever it was, and
I'm telling you, man, go back and watch the tape, though. Like, it wasn't. I mean, there were some bad throws, but there was a lot of times that this was just bad concepts too.
Sure, I get that, but it's 21 interceptions. Like, how many interceptions is too much?
Josh Allen had 17 last year.
Oh, sure, but Josh Allen also.
I get it. It's Josh Allen.
Was the Bills? That's the thing, and how. Also, and
look what Josh Allen's working with. He's got a way better roster than Howell had. I just think
it's interesting you bring up out that because do you know who PFF's number 1 graded quarterback was last year? It was Josh Allen with a 92 grade ahead of Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott and then Matt Stafford. Sam Howell was the 33rd graded QB. He was 1 place above Zach Wilson. And he was 2 places behind Tommy DeVito, which is, I suppose, the counter to the argument there.
That's a pretty good counter, but the team just Washington was so bad last year. That offense was terrible. That's all I'm gonna say. I think there's something there. Just call. I'm not saying he's the guy. I'm not saying we found him. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm just saying is I'm not, because when the trade first came in, I hated it. That was terrible. And then I'm slowly coming around on it. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, you know what? When I the comments,
forget them. Just go to the super chats. Go to the super chats. Forget them. Stop.
It's perfectly. I know. I have to say, it's perfectly valid to point out PFF grades. They don't get everything right, but it's these are people who are watching every play. So. It's just ludicrous to suggest that they're not going to get everything right, but they're also not going to get everything wrong as well. I understand the Howell trade. I'm just not sure that I don't really understand the value. But then if other teams were I feel like the Seahawks have overspent on so many trades in the past that I don't trust them Like short of somebody else going, hey, look, this other team are offering this, and the Seahawks got it done. I don't trust it. To me, it felt like an overpay. The Commanders already signed Marcus Mariota and were going to draft a quarterback. They had zero leverage. And how do we end up trading out of the third round, swapping it for a fourth? That's like a 25 pick difference. Like, how did that happen? It reminded me so much of the Charlie Whitehurst trade, where they basically traded down a whole round almost and gave up a third to get Whitehurst. It was garbage.
I mean, this is the classic Seattle Seahawks move, though. Overtrade for someone or overpay for your own free agents. They're overvaluing their own guys. They do this all the time.
Someone in the comments has put, swing, I'd rather take a chance at him, swing for the fences. This is not a swing for the fences move. Swinging for the fences is trading up and getting one of these quarterbacks that's going to go in the top 10. Or swinging for the fences is going and getting Anthony Richardson last year. Or CJ Stroud. This is not swinging for the fences with Sam Howell. This is more of the same. This is bringing in somebody who the Commanders determined wasn't good enough. That's not a swing for the fences. They've got to find a way through this, Adam. And just as every year goes by, we could sit here in a month and run through all of the picks Seattle makes in the draft, and we could go, that's a really good draft. They've added this player, and this player who we really like. It's what we've done for the last 2 years. Slap an A+ grade on it, and we could watch another 9-8 season. Eventually, they have to find the key difference makers, and that is going to mean finding an elite pass rusher from somewhere, or having the kind of loaded defensive line, which means that you're getting pressure in a lot of different ways, and they need to get a quarterback, and they just have to do that. They can't keep waiting and waiting and waiting. The Russell Wilson trade was 3 off seasons ago. They can't just keep kicking the can down the road. I think they know that, but when are they actually going to, do the business or get off the pot? Because if they just keep waiting forever, they're going to be an average team.
Well, I think John probably could look at how Pete Carroll's career has been. He's been fired. That role he was given doesn't appear to be. Doesn't seem to be doing that much at the VMAC. Pete Carroll. With his apparent move upstairs. So I think we can probably say, he was fired. He was given 2 years basically to try and build something after the Russell Wilson trade. And so I wonder if Schneider looks at that thinking, well, there's not many, all the people that are insulating me from criticism. John's obviously been elevated to the guy, and that was his whole original press conference was about that. And I think most of the moves that have happened have been indicative that Schneider is the head honcho right now. So it's interesting. I think he probably feels like if you're taking the Pete Carroll example as an indicator, I would say John Schneider's got 2 drafts to find something. So it'll be interesting to see if it doesn't fall his way from a quarterback standpoint this year. Would he approach next year's with reckless abandon, thinking that if it doesn't work, I'm probably not going to be here anyway?
I don't know, because they've committed to Mike McDonald for 6 years. It just feels to me like they've created a partnership, and that the intention will be to see McDonald and Schneider through. Like the idea of firing Schneider and then pairing McDonald with another coach, because if it doesn't work to the point that Schneider gets fired, then don't you question McDonald as well? And then what do? Bring in a GM who might want his own coach? Does Mike McDonald experience enough to have a contacts list where he could bring in a replacement GM? I just wonder whether the Seahawks are kind of tied to these 2 guys for the foreseeable. And John needs to draft a quarterback. Like, he needs to find a quarterback. He needs to identify someone with the traits who can be a quarterback. And then he has to put his money where his mouth is. He's kept saying they want to draft one every year and they want to keep doing this. Well, he's got to start taking some shots. He's got to be prepared that a quarterback's going to come in and maybe not be on the roster in a couple of years to try and find the guy.
But he's needed to do that for ages.
Yeah.
Him and the management who have needed to do it for. So, it's a nice idea that, he would get 6 years with McDonald. But if they're in the same position for 3 or 4 years, there's no way Schneider should keep his job longer than that. Like, what would he have done to deserve it?
I suppose it depends, because, it's quite hard to judge how you judge success and failure as a GM. Like, how do the games play out? If he drafts that if he does the next 3 drafts and his first 2 picks in every draft is a bust, is that a failure? It could be. But then what if he finds the next Max Crosby, the next Richard Sherman, and the next Bobby Wagner, in between rounds? Well, Wagner was a second round pick, but you get my point. Like if he or the next Russell Wilson, let's say, like, how you determine success and failure as a GM. I think if they were thinking short term with John Schneider, he would have gone with Pete Carroll. I think that I think this is almost a reinforcing of his situation. I don't know if he sees it that way or they do see it that way, but by appointing a young coach who is not on a short-term deal, is on a 6-year contract, and putting him with John Schneider, it's hard to see how, if this fails, the next GM comes in and they're told, right, you're working with Mike McDonald, but who, by the way, is the coach who got the last GM fired. So I would have thought a new GM, if you wanted to get a serious GM, he needs to be allowed to go and run his own coaching search, because Mike McDonald's not Pete Carroll. So he's not got the reputation and the chops. So I don't know how that plays out. I think they've probably got a year's grace on this quarterback thing. I think this time next year, if they don't draft somebody this year who can be the answer, whether that's an early pick or somebody later on, there aren't any later round options in my opinion that are worth having. I think there's going to be an immense amount of pressure on him to find a quarterback next year, and you never want to be in that position, because if the other team sense you are desperate and if you are having to trade up, you have got no leverage. They'd almost be better off doing it now. Do you think they would do it now? Robbie, is there any chance whatsoever right now? Have they set up a situation where nobody expects them to move up so that they can still try, but without a layer of desperation?
I mean, the only possibility is that they're willing to give up more first in the next couple of years. Other than that, they have nothing. They don't have enough draft stock to move up. I mean, it would be crazy to move down as far as they have in the Sam Howell trade and then think that you can move up in the draft and get a quarterback. I just don't think they have the draft capital to do it.
Adam,
it would take someone willing to take something in the future.
What if here's a scenario then for you. Lance Zierlein says Drake May, he was hearing that Drake May might be a faller. You suddenly hear that maybe JJ McCarthy is the 3rd best quarterback in the draft. Now we're hearing the Commanders want to draft JJ McCarthy 2nd overall. What if the league doesn't view the quarterbacks the way that the media thinks? What if Caleb Williams goes first, the Commanders take Jaden Daniels or McCarthy? Let's say there's something in this McCarthy tour that Tom Pelissero chucked out this week. Let's say it's McCarthy. What if the league is a bit concerned about Jaden Daniels, his stature, and Drake May's footwork and complete inconsistency in the last year? Is it beyond the realms of possibility that if one of those players is still available 8, 9, 10? Well, firstly, is it beyond the realms of possibility that one of those players is there? And second of all, what are the chances of the Seahawks moving up if they are? Because in that situation, it probably wouldn't take 3 first-rounders.
That probably cost you next year's one to move up 6 places.
Probably.
Look, if it's the only scenario that could happen in is if they have a completely different view on the guy that happens to fall versus the other 8 teams, and also the 4 or 5 teams in front of them that also might, the Raiders from 13 may want to say, well, we'll go up 3 spots so that they can. I can't imagine a situation where it would be the right guy for them and they'd also have a free run at him from the teams around him. I can't see how that would happen unless it was, they were the only team that thought that Drake May was worth a top 3 pick, and every other team let him fall to 10, and the other 5 teams didn't want to go and get him. I don't know. I can't see how that's realistic unless they then have to be in a bidding war and stick the 1st round pick and maybe 2026's 2nd round pick to get him, and then is that a big overpay? I just can't see a scenario where that would happen. It's not like a Mahomes where they've got an idea on someone and has not been talked about. These are the main guys that have been scrutinized to the nth degree by everyone. It would strike me as surprising if that scenario unfolded.
What if they love Michael Penix? If they love Penix, they could potentially jump the Raiders. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think the Howell trade was indicative of them believing they're not going to be able to get a quarterback this year. And they've done the deal so that they wanted a backup and they wanted somebody with at least some youth on his side and something they could work with. So I don't think it's going to happen. Before we finish with the super chats, I did want to just come to this. There was a comment from Ricardo who said, build a super team and be ready to plug in a quarterback. San Francisco competed with Jimmy Garoppolo and found Purdy late. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. I want to give a thought on it first. I hope this doesn't become a thing where people think this is any more realistic than drafting a franchise quarterback of the level of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, because the San Francisco 49ers have had an epic run of about 8 years. Like, when did they draft Eric Armstead? It was like 2015 or 16. Like, it's nearly a decade's worth of great drafting from the Niners. They've pulled off 2 unbelievable trades in Trent Williams and Christian McCaffrey. They've hit on blue chip players, like legit league leading at their position players, day 3 and late day 2. This has been an unbelievable run. And the pièce de la résistance. They have Kyle freaking Shanahan, who could turn one of us 3 into a franchise, well, not franchise quarterback, but he's a quarterback whisperer. Like, basically, you go and work with him, you do what Kyle says, you succeed. Brock Purdy would not have the success that he's had playing for Pete Carroll and Shane Waldron that he's had it with Shanahan. It's Shanahan. He is magic. He is a magician. So the Seahawks don't have any of that. And by the way, they've spent in the last 2 drafts 3 first rounders and 3 second round picks. Fellas, are the Seahawks any closer to having a super team? So how much more investment needs to go in? They've spent more first round picks than pretty much every other team in the league in the last 2 years. And are not close to having a super team. So how many more first round and second round picks need to be spent until the Seahawks have a team? Are we talking about potentially in 2029 being in a position to draft a quarterback here? Like, when eventually is it just, you've just got to bloody get a quarterback. You don't have Shanahan, you don't have Kittle, you don't have Warner, you don't have Greenlaw, you don't have Trent Williams, you don't have Christian McCaffrey, you don't have Debo, you don't have Brandon Ayuk, you don't have Usyk, you don't have all of those guys. You have to find a different way. And you are never going to be a flawless team and then plug in a quarterback. And the quarterback's just sat there waiting to be plucked when you've got that flawless team. It don't work that way. The great benefit of a great quarterback is he will cover a lot of flaws. So if you are not great, let's say at safety or at linebacker, but you've got an amazing quarterback, you'll get through it. You'll get through it. And if someone said that's nonsense, I'm sorry, it's not nonsense. That's just the reality of the NFL. If you don't understand that, then you don't get it. That's just how it is. You have the haves and the have-nots at quarterback. The Bengals were crap until they got Joe Burrow and gave him some weapons. The Bills were perennially awful until they got Josh Allen. You know, the Rams are trying to get a Super Bowl track. They got Matt Stafford to get to the freaking Super Bowl. Like, whatever you think of the Cowboys, they consistently are competitive because Dak Prescott's really good, at least in the regular season. He sucks in the playoffs. And Mahomes is Mahomes. You need to find a really good quarterback.
Just to counter on that just a little bit, Rob. I totally agree with you, but I don't think there's anything wrong. You also don't want to force the situation. Just go get a quarterback like a Trey Lance. That isn't going to work. Force the situation that you throw a bunch of draft picks just so you can try to say you got that quarterback. I'm all for risking it if it's a guy you believe in, but I don't think there's anything wrong with keep building up your line, your O-line, your D-line, adding pieces to the puzzle that can help you in the future. It's not going to be all San Francisco. I think that's kind of unrealistic, as you just said, because they had so many first round picks, so many first round defensive linemen as well. But there's nothing wrong with building up that roster. And then if the opportunity does present maybe next year or the year after, and you have a really good team, there's a lot of teams that they say they're a quarterback away, right? So if you're able to go and find that trade partner, because that's the other part of the piece, right? You got to have someone who's willing to trade with you, and then you're going to have to outbid some other team that may need a quarterback. So there's things that go into it. I don't think there's anything wrong with hoping that if you can't get the guy, build the pieces around it until you can find the quarterback. I don't think right for the plucking is the right word, but finding the guy that you can go lean on to, hopefully win you a Super Bowl. That's all we can account for, right?
No, I agree. The point you made is the important one, which is that you can't force it, and if you can't get the guy that you have the conviction in, there's not much you can do, and that's exactly right. And Robbie, I think that scenario is playing out right in before our eyes, which is why they've traded for Sam Howell. But when I see in the comments people saying, "I want the team to build the O-line before the quarterback," it doesn't work that way. You don't get to pick. Like if you get your route to your quarterback, you go and get the quarterback. They don't have to start year one. You can give them a year's grace and continue to build the O-line if you want to. It's far easier to build an O-line when you have a quarterback on a rookie contract, by the way. But you can't, Adam, just say, no, I'm not even watching the quarterbacks until we've built the team up. Do you know who did that once? San Francisco 49ers. They have admitted they'd never even scouted Patrick Mahomes. And they took Solomon Thomas instead because they wanted to build up the lines and wait for Kirk Cousins. Imagine this Niners team with Patrick Mahomes on it. We would be living in a living nightmare forever. The NFL, I might stop watching the NFL because it would be too much to watch this Niners team with Mahomes winning everything every year by 1 million points. It would not be fun. So you have to strike when the opportunity is there. If you can't, Robbie's right. If you can, go and do it. You can't wait forever.
They're also not like linear strategies, I don't think. I don't think John Schneider's going to wake up in a cold sweat at 4 a.m. and think, we need to build a super team. Like he's been trying to do that for the last 12 years in Seattle. Everyone enters the draft. Everyone's trying to pick good players. I think it's just a little bit simplistic to say, what if we just build an amazing team by drafting all the great players, and then we'll just have the situation you can drop a quarterback into? Like Cliff Averill, Richard Sherman were quite critical about a couple of years ago in various shows by, criticizing Seahawks fans for expecting lightning in a bottle. Like what they did in that scenario with Russell Wilson was so unique. You're not going to have that situation where you just so happen to have a defense of 6 or 7 all pros, and then you just happen to find a quarterback who, is good behind your offensive line, and you've got an all-world running back. It just doesn't work like that. I don't like the idea that it's some linear strategy that, well, we'll just make every other player in the team amazing, and then we'll just get a quarterback. I just don't think it works like that. The point where the players themselves were basically telling Seahawks fans, this will never happen again. What happened was completely unique. And, and if you look at the Niners, they've just hit on a number of 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th round draft picks. Like that's the strategy that has to happen. And yeah, it would be amazing to build a super team, but that starts with just like picking good players all the way through the draft. And that's something that Seattle have just not been good enough at for too long. And that's why we're in this position. It takes you back to the purgatory situation, really, because ultimately they haven't picked good enough players.
And that's the thing, I kind of want to break out. I want to break out of this now. I think we've had enough of the sort of the mediocrity of the later Carroll years, and want to see the team. I want to dream again. I want to go into the playoffs thinking, wow, the Seahawks playing on. They might not win, but they could win a divisional game. They could get to the NFC Championship again. They could have a real serious go at this. If I'm a Rams fan right now, I know that probably the Aaron Donald situation changes it, but before the Aaron Donald announcement, you'd be thinking, there's a chance next season. And I want to feel that way about the Seahawks, and I don't think they will get there until they draft a quarterback. And I'm resigned to it. It's not going to happen this year. But they can't wait forever. They can't. I mean, look, they literally can't wait forever, can they? Because next year they're going to have to move on from Geno Smith because of the contract, unless they extend him. And so, Sam Howell will take his place as the bridge next year unless Geno plays very, very well. So there is sort of change coming, but yeah. And by all, we've talked about some important topics here, I think. I'm still quite upbeat and positive No, I'm not even quite. I don't need to qualify it. I'm still upbeat and positive about the change of direction, and the fact that it's not Pete Carroll anymore. Imagine that'd be so despairing, wouldn't it, if it was just another year of Carroll? So I think it's good, and I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like, and looking forward to seeing what Mike McDonald and Ryan Grubb can do, and Dirty and people like that. But I'm also really eager to see the pieces come into place now that can drive this team towards a title. Let's go through the super chats then. This one from Big Mike says, ask yourselves this question: would Shanahan or McVay bring Jamal Adams back? Those are winning franchises in our division. So yes or no, fellas, would they bring Jamal Adams back?
No.
They've got the chance to, and I'm almost certain they will say no.
No. The Rams have signed Tre'Davious White today, which is interesting. I noticed on the clip that somebody posted a clip a while ago, and he showed his interception from last season. It was against Sam Howell, but then he did, as we've already discussed, he had about 21 of them. This one from Matt says, Robbie, what's more likely, Jay McCarthy going in the top 5 or Sam Howell becoming quarterback of the future?
Great question, Matt. Great question. Crap. I'm gonna go McCarthy going to the top 5 now. I can't believe I just said that. I still am not going to understand it. I think it'll be a terrible pick for someone to take him in the top 5. But
and if you sit up straight up and get him, Robbie,
I owe you a jersey.
A McCarthy jersey.
That's right. Yep. I haven't forgotten the bet.
And a reminder, 6th ranked quarterback on my board. He's not. I'm not saying he's good. Matt B says, I saw that Seattle are going to visit with UCF quarterback John Reese Plumlee. It's a great name. John Reese Plumlee. Any thoughts on him as a prospect? I'm not sure I'd even heard his name before. Matt, I apologize. I have done a lot of work on this draft class. I have not watched John Reese Plumlee. I was intending to after the link, and have just not got round to it because I had a mad work week last week. So I can't shed it. Have you guys watched him? Because I've
watched him. I watched a little bit of him. Yeah, I don't know if he's going to play wide receiver or if he's playing quarterback. He's phenomenal with the ball in his hand. I don't know how he is with as an actual quarterback though. He didn't look like he ran a lot of read option and scrambled around a lot and ran for a lot of yards, and he makes a lot of guys miss. He's a hell of an athlete, that's for sure. But I don't know if he's a quarterback. Maybe he is, but not from what I could see.
Yeah, my expectations on projected undrafted free agent quarterback John Reese Plumlee working out are quite modest.
We made a lot of plum and almond tarts at work this week.
Ooh.
And that's about as close as I've got to watching this guy play, if I'm honest.
Well, maybe you could rename them as Plumlee Tarts if he's drafted by the Seahawks. Curtis is a one for you, actually, Adam. He says, thank you, Curtis. Support for the new blog chat feature. And I need to hear Adam say Rook. Oh, this is a terrible name to try and say in the middle of a live stream. Rook Arororo in his trademark deep baritone.
Is it? It's got to be Rook Orohoru?
No, it's Rook. It is literally Rook Arororo.
Is it actually Rook Arororo?
Yes, he's done an interview that I saw, and he said, think of row your boat.
Okay.
I said it, yeah.
So I saw this, and I've been trying to practice it for the last 15, 20 minutes, and I've obviously been practicing completely the wrong thing. So Rook Arororo, come on down.
Do you know, it's beautifully said. It took me about 3 months to say it properly. So you've done it in basically within seconds of discovering what it is.
But, you know, this the Southern education versus the Northern, Rob. You know,
there we go.
Some things can't be compromised on.
All we need to know here, though, is Game of Thrones, the ones in the North were way cooler than the ones in the South. So, you know. Never watched it. Well, it's probably because you're Southern, you know.
Southern softy, yeah.
The Southern lot were, you know, nobody liked them, and we had Jon Snow. So, you know, although he has a lot more hair than me. Blitzy the Clown says, since Curtis is in the house, for reference, I don't know if you're still with us, Curtis. Can we talk cap for a moment? We may show about $2.4 million available, but really we're underwater because we still need to pay the draft class and practice squad plus discus. Thank you, Blitzy. Really appreciate that. I don't know if Curtis is still here. If he can answer that, then great. What I will say is that they are going to have to raise some money at some point, and I don't know anywhere near as much of this as Curtis does, but I think there is a way to sort of work DK Metcalf's contract to create about $5 million or something. And there's also the option that they could trade Draymond Jones after June the 1st, possibly during training camp, to save $11.5 million, which I think if they draft a defensive lineman first, would be a distinct possibility. And they've started meeting with these people. You know, they've showed a bit of interest in Braden Fisk from Florida State. He's got some injury issues, though, some injury baggage. And there's one or two others, and they do get linked with Byron Murphy a lot, who's quite impressive, and one or two others. But yeah, is there anything else that you guys want to talk? There's one other question that I just want to ask. I think Robbie, just because I know you've seen a lot of the college players, Robbie. Is there anything else that anybody wants to touch on before we finish? Is there anything pressing on your mind with related to the Seahawks? Chuck a topic out there if there is, Adam and Robbie.
It's by no means pressing, but I did mention on our little thread about, you know, how Denver obviously lost the Russell Wilson trade emphatically. But I mentioned that I wondered if Seattle have had enough return on investment to be seen as winning it yet. And if not, I wondered what you guys thought maybe has to happen for them to, you know, walk away from it with a resounding win. I kind of feel like they would need Cross and Witherspoon to warrant big second contracts for it to be seen as a thumping win. Not Denver.
Good question.
Catastrophically lost, but it's just whether both teams end up.
Did they use?
They'll have to win it still, I think.
Yeah. Did they make best use of the resources they get? Just quickly, Curtis has replied, so I just want to put this in. So you can restructure DK and get $5.7 million. They can restructure Geno to get 5.6. Obviously, this all goes into next year. They can boot Darrell Taylor, John Rattigan, or who's M. Jack Sr.? Oh, Michael Jackson, and pick up about 6.5. And then there's the Draymond Jones one as well. It's a good question. I was never a fan of Charles Cross, but let me just get the draft from 2022 up, because there's nobody that. I mean, I suppose you could say they drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba the following year. So,
by the way, to the comments, I know that we need to. I know it's early to say. The question is, what has to happen, in your opinion, going forward for it to be seen as a win? It's too early to say right now if Seattle has won. It's just a silly, water cooler discussion.
I think yes, Charles Cross has to work out. He has to be better under the new coaching staff, and probably has to sign that second contract. Devin Witherspoon, I don't think Devin Witherspoon has to be like a Hall of Fame or anything, but I think because he was a top 5 pick, you need to see him become something more than just a decent starter. He needs to become a really good player that other teams really want to have. And I think Jackson Smith and Jigba has to be more than he's shown as a rookie, obviously. I think it's that. I think it's the first round picks more than anything. You need to they need to take a step forward. You could throw Boya Mafe into the mix. It's hard because I wish I'd thought about this in advance. I suppose what I would leave it at this and let Robbie say, can they come out of this draft with like 3 really good, I want not elite, but necessarily players who are top end towards their position. So if that's Cross, Witherspoon, and Jackson Smith and Jigba, fine. That's what I think they need. I think they need at least 3, if not 4 or 5, given the number of picks they had, to sort of win that trade. Robbie?
Well, JSN wasn't a part of that trade package, right? He was our pick. So this is what we got out of the Russell Wilson trade. This is what I just had to Google it real fast. Russell Wilson trade completed. This is who we got out of the trade. We got Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, Drew Lock, Charles Cross, Boya Mafe, Tyreek Smith, Devin Witherspoon, and Derek Hall. I would say we have won the trade. I don't think it's too early to say that. I think it's easily, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, potentially 5 starters out of that. I think we won the trade.
Interesting. I don't know yet. It just feels as if.
I mean, am I saying it's like it's an all worldly trade. And we were like, we started dominating everything. No, but we got 5 starters out of 1 player. I think that's a win, and we got out of a contract that we weren't going to want to pay Russell what he got. So I think yeah, it's a win.
No, I see that point of view.
Robbie, my counter to that. Sorry, Rob. My counter to that, Robbie, is they picked 5 players out of it, and they could have picked any other 5 players that. And yeah, like they obviously got players that are good, but do you think you need to see? Do those players need to amount to something for it to be seen as a win, as opposed to, well, they got these guys, therefore they win?
I mean, yeah, I would like to see them. I'd like to see, Devin Witherspoon continue on the trajectory that he had last year. And, in my opinion, he should have been rookie of the year. And I think he has the potential to be a game changer. And that's what we kind of wanted out of that trade, right? Is someone that's going to be a game changer. I think he has that ability. So yeah, I want to see him say that or do that. I think we still have some potential in Derek Hall. I'd like to see what he can do. Boye Mafe took a huge step forward to year 2. And I think that's a huge win. And if he can continue to progress and if they reach second contracts and from the Seahawks, then yeah, I think for me, I don't think they have to be Pro Bowl every year or whatever. But yeah, I do think at least one of those guys like Devin Witherspoon needs to be someone that can be a game changer, and the rest of them just need to be impact players that can make changes, for the team. Yeah, in my opinion.
The interesting thing is when you actually look at that second round, the Seahawks, it's not a good second round from 2022. The Seahawks probably did as well as anybody with Mafe and Walker. So even if you compare to like who else was there, none of the players around them, or certainly came after them, have amounted to anything. So they probably, if you were other teams and you were sort of looking, even the players who went just before Mafe and Walker, you're probably thinking, oh, wish we'd got them instead. So that's actually the positive thing. And when you actually look at the 9th pick in that draft, which they got from Denver, unless you were hopeful that they were going to take Garrett Wilson or Chris Olave, or I guess Kyle Hamilton, but if they'd have done that after the Wilson trade, with all of the needs that they had, if they'd have drafted another safety or another receiver with that first pick, it would have been really difficult to stomach. And then some of the other players who followed, I mean, like if they'd have traded down and taken Trent McDuffie, would anybody be, it's hard to sort of know really what else. There's no glaring misses there. So it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to sort of be too critical of them, I think, from the trade. Robbie, the thing I was going to ask is do you have any sort of draft crushes at the minute? Is there anybody that you think, I think we talked about Fatanu a little bit, didn't we? But is there anybody else that you think I'd love to get them? Whatever round it is, have you got some players that you've kind of really got your eye on here?
Well, I really like Chop Robinson. I think that guy is he's something else. And I'd love it if that guy fell to 16, but I don't think that's realistic. And I'm still a big Spencer Rattler fan. If we're going to talk quarterback, I think for me, he could be one of those guys that he's just being slept on.
Yeah. Jim Nagy said he thinks he will go in the second round this week.
Oh, interesting. I didn't see that.
He also said he didn't think the Seahawks would take an offensive lineman with that in the first round, which was interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah.
That's why I've been sort of thinking defensive lineman as well.
That's because he thinks we're just going to trade out of the first round.
Maybe, but I thought, what does he think? I'd love to know. There's a chance. There's a smidgen of a chance. Might get a chance to interview Jim this week. So hopefully, I don't know whether to ask him that, because it's almost inappropriate to try and ask him who he thinks. But he has volunteered the info of who he thinks they won't take. So maybe we could just go through all the positions, and then the one he doesn't say, we could just be a process of elimination. But I did wonder, does he think quarterback or defensive line if it's not that? Because I don't know, maybe another position. But anyway, if there's nothing else that anybody wants to bring to the table, we will call it a day on this one. Thank you for the super chats. Really appreciate it. Good to catch up and get into some Seahawks conversations. Like I said, there may be some interesting things coming up in the next few days. So subscribe to the channel and you won't miss any of it. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more analysis. And like the video, Leave a comment in the comment section, even if you are active in the live chat, because it helps with the algorithm. It all helps. Great numbers watching live again. Really appreciate everybody sort of checking out what two British guys and Robbie think about this. Do you like? Is that an unfair, like two British guys and Robbie? Is that what we should call the streams?
That's pretty good. I liked it. I liked it.
It is amazing that there's. I think, Adam, that there's so many people want to listen to what two Brits think about all this.
Yeah, and obviously universally people respect the fact that we talk about it. You never get any criticism about talk about your own football, talk about your own thing, piss off back to where you come from. Never get any of it. So that's really nice of people, especially on Twitter.
Well said. Twitter's a great place.
Great.
God, Twitter's the worst. Oh.
Yeah, that was that classic piece of British sarcasm I was delivering there, Robbie. It's a hellhole. But anyway, moving on. Thank you to everybody for watching. We'll be back soon and more videos to come. So make sure you subscribe. Until next time, bye for now.